Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Jack. I'm an amateur high school makeup artist. What? Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Jack. I'm an amateur makeup artist and a huge book nerd. Today we're going to be getting ready while I chat about Cherie Priest's book Boneshaker, which I have so many thoughts about. So yeah, let's dive right in. So I kind of didn't want my very first video on YouTube to be a critical video, but at the same time, I feel like I can't really escape it. I'm harsh on books. I'm very picky about what I read. And this book, I had to sit down. I had to sit down after 8 chapters because I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. So the premise of Boneshaker, and FYI, spoilers everywhere. The premise of Boneshaker is basically that our main character, whose name is Briar Wilkes, was married to this mad scientist. His name is Dr. Blue. She does not use his last name because of things I'll explain later. Dr. Blue created this amazing mining machine, which he called Dr. Blue's incredible bone-shaking drill engine. I'll let that sink in for a sec. And everyone was like so excited about it. By the way, this is set in Seattle, so wow. I really can't multitask. So Boneshaker set in Seattle around a little bit after, I want to say, the Civil War. So it's definitely like very steampunky historical fiction. Yeah, steampunky historical fiction, I think, is what we're going to go for. And that's going to be important later. Anyways, so they're doing some mining. Seattle is in Washington, which isn't even a state yet, hence historical fiction. And something, it's not really explained super clearly. There's a prologue that is like taken out of a newspaper clipping that talks about like the big incident. And basically what happened is that this giant Boneshaker engine thing, which we don't really ever get a really great description of either, it's being tested by Dr. Blue, and he loses control of it somehow, and it like destroys a couple blocks of downtown Seattle, and then it hits like underground pipes, which release this gas that turns everyone around that inhales the gas into like zombies, kind of. They're called rotters, and from what I can tell, they are just mindless shufflers who like to eat humans. So our very first foray into this world is evil mad scientist creates a machine that creates zombies. And then the prologue finishes with there's a wall built around the city, and you either have to go over the wall or under the wall to get into Seattle. And that's it. That is all the buildup that we get going into this book. So now we cut to the main character, whose name is Briar Wilkes. You find out slowly that Briar Wilkes is technically Briar Blue because she was married to Dr. Blue, who created the Boneshaker machine. And I wanted to love Briar. I wanted to love her so much. I was very drawn to this book because she didn't seem like the typical like YA character, you know? Like she was not Bella Swan. She was not like pretty and petite and fragile and oh, I'm so shy. No, she was like no nonsense woman who like works for a living to support her and her son. And she goes by Briar Wilkes, we already talked about this, because she doesn't want to be connected to Leviticus Blue, who is, evil mad scientist. I keep having to remind myself that because sometimes I'm like, what? Anyways, there's also something up with her dad that I never quite understood. I guess her dad was also bad. But like there was something about a prison break. And her dad like helped people break out of prison and get out of Seattle. I didn't really understand the whole point of that. So yeah, that wasn't ever properly explained. It was really more of a, this is why the criminal underworld is really, 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 really respectful of Briar Wilkes because of her dad. Which seems like a contrivance to me, but we're gonna go with it. We're gonna suspend our disbelief and we're gonna go with it. So the first 2 chapters are basically setting up what life is like for Briar and her son Zeke after the Boneshaker incident. So Briar works in a water purification factory because the gas is all over everything. The gas that makes zombies. It gets into the water, but it can be boiled away and separated out of the water so that the water is clean to drink. It's set up at the beginning that water is an important resource. But then we kind of forget about it. So basically, Briar lives right outside of Seattle in this dinky little apartment with barely $20 to her name, trying to raise her son, who is the epitome of, my dad and granddad weren't bad people and I'm gonna prove it, and we're gonna be famous and everyone's gonna love us because I'm gonna prove that it wasn't my dad's fault that Seattle got turned into zombies. Which was exhausting. I won't even lie. That was exhausting. Just his relentless optimism, which was very much a counter to Briar's continual, what is the word I'm looking for? Pessimism. Like just absolute pessimism. You don't really hear her talk about Dr. Blue, her husband. She doesn't really mention anything about her dad except to talk about like how awful he was at the beginning, but then like how randomly she like loved him enough to bury him in her backyard beneath a tree with all of his stuff. And like everyone hates her because randomly like police officers showed up and dug up her dad's body to search for something and then left his dead body for her to bury again. I was really confused. I was so confused because the whole book talks about how much other people hate Dr. Blue and they hate Briar because she was married to him. But this book is so empty. It's so empty. Like, we had an interaction with police officers. And then there's a reporter who came to do a piece on Dr. Blue. And Briar let him in for some reason to talk about Dr. Blue. And then, Briar like randomly goes to work at the factory. I say randomly because it's like, there's like no rhyme or reason to anything that's happening. Anyways, so she goes to work and her gloves that she has to wear for work, purifying the water, have been vandalized with blue paint. And there's no one around, so she can't really like pin it on anyone. There's no one around. But there's like no one around this whole book. Because like we don't see any interactions with her coworkers. We don't see her talking to people on the street. I don't even remember if she passes anyone on the street on her way to work. Like Zeke has like a friend who works at a church of some kind, and there's like a nun and a priest and this friend. And she like has conversations with them, and then she's like all alone again. It's just all the side characters felt like they were like pieces of cardboard for like a set. For like a set of a stage play. Like they were there to give their lines and then move. Which I didn't like. That just feels boring to me. And if Briar were more of an interesting character, maybe it wouldn't bother me as much. But she's stoic. She doesn't talk a lot. She has a lot of internal dialogue that is very much like, oh, woe is me, everyone hates me, blah blah blah. But I like don't see evidence of people hating her except for like the random glove incident and nothing else. Whew. Anyways, the plot is pushed forward by Briar's son, Zeke. He decides he's going to go into the city. He's going to go under the wall and into the city, and he's going to find his father's lab because he is Briar Wilkes and Dr. Blue's son. He's going to find his dad's lab, and he's going to find evidence that his dad was not trying to destroy Seattle, and he's going to somehow exonerate both his dad, his mom, and his grandfather. This boy is like 12, maybe, which is where the young adult piece comes in. This boy is 12. And I bless him and his enthusiastic optimism. Just bless him. That was so cute of him. Just so cute. So Zeke sneaks out and he decides that he's going to go under the wall. And he's going to find evidence. And what does he take with him? He takes his grandfather's pistol that Briar has for some reason. And he takes with him the safety of his grandfather's name. Because apparently, and it was never explained completely why, his grandfather, whose name I don't even remember, is well respected inside Seattle. And so if Zeke says that he's so-and-so's grandson, everyone will respect him, and all of the criminals will leave him alone, because that is the piece of whoever this guy is. I can't even remember his name. It felt like such a contrivance. We don't know anything about this man, but somehow he's important enough that his grandson can use his name for safety. It just felt really weird. Anyways, so Zeke leaves. And Briar's like, oh my god, where is my son? So she goes to talk to this friend. Wow, that is a lot more pigmented than I thought it was going to be. So she goes to talk to Zeke's friend who works at a church of some kind. There's mention of a father and a nun. This friend like spills the tea on, where Zeke is. And Briar's like, well, crap, now I have to go into the city to save him. And so she goes to the tunnel that Zeke uses to get into the city, because that's where his friend told her that Zeke went. She goes, and there's a tunnel collapse. Because there's earthquakes still because of the Boneshaker machine. I don't know. that just seemed oddly convenient. So then Briar's like, well, crap, now I gotta find a way over the wall. So she goes to an airport. And when I mean airport, I mean like old-fashioned, like Zeppelin kind of airport. So she goes to this airport, and she's like looking around. She goes to like this random dude and was like, hey, I need to get over the wall. He directs her to the pirates, who are on the opposite side of the port. And she goes, and by the way, she's wearing her dad's old buckle because she is also going to take advantage of her father's name. So she's got this giant belt buckle that everyone somehow knew that her father wore. And the pirates recognize it, and they're like, oh, you're so-and-so's daughter. You want to go over the wall? Yeah, I need to go get my son. Okay, well, you're going to want to go with so-and-so. And they point her in so-and-so's direction. And at this point, I am very close to putting this book down because it's like, okay, so we're going to go over the wall. Great. Awesome. Cool. Then we cut back to Zeke's perspective. Zeke is being held up by a man with a gun. And he mentions his grandfather. And the guy is like, oh, you're so-and-so's grandson. And you really think that you can survive down here just on your grandfather's name. And at that point, I was like, ooh, I like this guy. He's like, logical so far. And Zeke's like, well, yeah, like, my grandfather's name is what keeps the peace. And this dude, instead of shooting this 12-year-old boy who is claiming to be so-and-so's grandson just out of nowhere, instead of shooting him and like taking his money and running for it like, a real criminal would do, this guy's like, well, this could be interesting. I'll help you. I'm gonna help you. And so he takes Zeke and is like, if you make any noise, I'm gonna push you out in front of the rotters so that they can eat you, and I'm gonna go back to doing what I was doing before you showed up. Which, charming. So then we switch back to Briar. And it's more talking about like, well, I've got to go over the wall. This one guy's going to help me. And like, he's big and strong and like, he's kind of an ugly brute, but he does it with like a sense of elegance and like, hello, obvious love interest. And at that point, I had to put the book down. And I swear to you, I probably sound really unhinged talking about this book. Talking about like, I probably sound like I'm jumping back and forth a lot between things. I promise you I am not. This book is just so... It's just so... I don't even know how to explain it. It's just... I have no words. Zeke's chapters are always like super short. There isn't much to his character besides his need to, exonerate his grandfather. And like, I had to put it down. I had to put it down after we described the love interest captain of a blimp, because I couldn't do it. The world I've already said this, the world felt so empty. Like, it felt like I was watching a stage play. And it wasn't even just the characters. Like, I think I could have handled having empty characters. But one of the other things that just made me put down this book was the way that it was written. Because, first of all, I have to look at what the name is. Dr. Blue's Incredible Bone-Shaking Drill Engine. I understand this is a YA book. And I wanted to cut the book some slack. But that just sounds so incredibly juvenile. That sounds like, I don't know, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is like a young children's book. It is not YA. And I understand that there's different levels of YA, which again is why I wanted to cut the book some slack. But just, I don't know, that specifically like shook me out of my suspension of disbelief. Like, this sounds like something a child made up. It doesn't sound like it belongs in the kind of story that Cherie was telling. Especially not one with zombies. And, like, you know, people dying and the entire city of Seattle being walled off. It just didn't feel like it fit. Another thing that really shook me out of my suspension of disbelief was just some of the phrasing that Priest used. There's a little bit where Zeke is going under the wall into Seattle, and he's talking about, like, he's having second thoughts, which I can kind of understand. Like, why would you want to go into a city full of, you know, zombies? And so he's like, oh, I'm having second thoughts. And then randomly she says, but his third thoughts were insistent. And I don't know if it's just me, but that wording was weird. It sounded, again, a little juvenile and just strange. Like, almost like she was, like, trying to be clever, almost, maybe a little bit, but at the same time, like, third thoughts. What is she talking? What is she talking about? Third thoughts. What? And, like, I remember reading that line, and I closed the book, and I sat there, and I was like, and I just sat there, and then I opened up the book again and kept going. But, like, that was another strike. And my last complaint about her style, besides the fact that everything felt very empty, like there's no character interaction besides, like, what absolutely had to happen to move the story along, was when she goes to the airport and she, like, describes the people that she's, like, going up to. She's describing the pirates. She's, like, describing them by, like, oh, he has a scar on his face, and this is the color of jacket that he's wearing. And then, out of nowhere, she describes the third and last gentleman as a coal black, word I cannot say. I had to put the book down again, because I was like, I am sorry, what? I checked I checked the publication date. This book was published in 2009. So, you know, it's older. And obviously, I am one of the whitest people that I know. So it's not like, you know, it's not my business to talk about whether or not an author can use that word. However, that seemed really odd. That just seemed like a really odd thing to say, a really odd descriptor of a man, when she didn't describe the race of the other two guys either. And I can't tell if she was doing it to like reinforce the time period that we're in, because like I said, this was after the Civil War, supposedly, in a very steampunk, retro, futuristic, you know, time. That just seemed really strange to me, that she would use that as a descriptor, especially when that was the only race that she brought up. And at that point, I kind of just had to put the book down, because I was 8 chapters in. I didn't feel connected to any of the characters. I was really annoyed by Zeke, the main character's son. The writing kept like pulling me out of the story. And I don't know if that's just me being picky, but like, I don't know. I couldn't get into it. After 8 chapters, I was just kind of done. Okay, so final thoughts. I wanted to like this book. I really did. I enjoyed the thought of a main character who wasn't 18, super skinny, like shy, reserved. The main love interest immediately falls for her, that kind of thing. Briar is definitely not your typical YA female lead. And I liked that. You know, she's already been married, she has a son, she's very no nonsense. But there's such a flatness to her character. I just didn't like her. Zeke was the same way. He didn't really have a whole lot behind him. And his want to exonerate his dad and his grandfather were very... It felt very contrived to me. Plus, the writing style just felt super juvenile, and I had to put it down. I DNF'd it at chapter 8. Yeah, I feel horrible. I feel horrible like putting books down, especially because this book received a lot of acclaim on Goodreads. And I like went into it thinking I was going to really really like it, and I just didn't. I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. So 2 out of 5 stars. 2 stars for creativity and for, points for trying to make a female character in a YA novel not be like the chosen one. I did enjoy that. Anyways, if you've made it this far, please hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I will see you next time. Bye.